Okay, let's dive in. We're unpacking source material today on a work that feels incredibly relevant to our moment. 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗪𝗡, Voix fantôme, Mémoire vive, 𝗧𝗔𝗓 by TATANKA.
Yeah, it really does.
The sources place this work right in the thick of things, this intense digital acceleration we're all experiencing, where it can feel like our cultural compass points are, well, maybe a little shaky, you know?
It taps into that feeling of rapid change, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The source highlights how the work emerges from a recognition that in this fast-paced world, certain memories and voices risk being overlooked, maybe even erased.
Right. And this work isn't just observing that. It seems to have a very clear mission. According to the source, it aims to reassert forgotten memory, to give a voice to the invisible, and to shine a light on the quiet, often overlooked strength found in the margins. It sounds like it's pushing back against that fading.
It is, yeah. And our goal with this deep dive is really to extract the core ideas from the source material about this work, like what makes it tick, what message it carries.
Right.
The sources describe it as a blend of poetic lyricism, electronic soundscapes, and deeply engaged narratives. It's definitely not just music. It feels like a statement.
There's a quote from Boris Cyrulnik featured prominently that really seems to underpin the whole project. Ce qui ne se nomme pas n'existe pas. Ce qui n'existe pas est condamné à se répéter.
Ah, yes. What is not named does not exist. What does not exist is condemned to repeat itself.
Yeah.
That quote is powerful because it immediately tells you this work is about acknowledgement, right? It's about bringing things into the light, giving them a name, giving them form.
Gracias.
Whether that's a forgotten place, a quiet voice, or a fading memory so they aren't lost and, cycles of neglect aren't just repeated endlessly.
So how does it actually go about this? The source material seems to structure the work around three major axes, and, well, we can follow that path, exploring the memory held in abandoned places.
Right.
The power of those secondary, often unheard voices, and finding resilience when everything feels like it's being effaced or wiped away. Let's maybe start with those spaces.
Sounds good. The abandoned places.
Okay, so this first axis delves into the memory of abandoned places. How does TATANKA, through this work, suggest we can, reanimate the past held within these deserted spaces?
Well, the sources paint a picture of revisiting these locations, empty houses, forgotten mining trails, kitchens where the fire has long gone out. What's fascinating, as described, is that these spaces aren't just seen as derelict or, ghostly. The work presents them as living archives, almost, full of stories waiting to be heard.
A track like La Maison qui n'a pas su tomber, The House That Couldn't Fall. I mean, that title itself gives the place agency, doesn't it? It resisted.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the source details how the work uses sensory descriptions to achieve this, like the grinding of wood, the peeling paint aren't just visual details. They become narrative elements. The walls are described as sighing under the wind, kind of imbuing the architecture itself with feeling, with memory.
That feels like more than just looking back fondly, though. Is the source saying this isn't just nostalgia?
It explicitly makes that distinction.
Yeah.
It's framed not as mere nostalgia, but as transmission.
Transmission, okay.
These places, by holding the imprint of the lives lived within them, the suffering, the hopes, the daily routines, they're actively transmitting something forward. They resist time, not just by standing, but by carrying those echoes.
So the very structure of the place becomes a conduit for history. That's a powerful insight. It's like the building itself is speaking if we only knew how to listen, sort of.
Exactly. This architectural and rural memory, according to the source, transforms into a kind of emotional mapping.
Emotional mapping.
It's described as an act of resistance against a contemporary world often prone to amnesia, particularly regarding places and communities that might be seen as, obsolete.
Which contrasts sharply with how we navigate the world today, doesn't it? We rely on precise, impersonal maps, GPS.
Totally.
This work suggests guiding yourself instead with an effective compass.
That's a beautiful phrase from the source, isn't it? It suggests finding your way, not by coordinates, but by feeling, by connection to the human history etched into the landscape.
Ah, okay.
Worn planks become pages of history. Empty rooms transform into poems. It's an invitation, really, for you to find roots on paths less traveled, guided by the layers of human experience rather than satellites.
Moving from the places to the people connected to them, the second axis is the power of secondary voices. This idea feels incredibly resonant today. What does the source reveal about these often eclipsed voices?
Yeah, this theme focuses on the voices that aren't the loudest, the most dominant, or, the most visible. The source highlights Hymn pour la deuxième chaise, hymn for the second chair, as pretty central to this idea.
The second chair. That immediately brings to mind an orchestra again, right? Someone vital to the sound, but maybe not the first violin.
That's exactly the analogy. The source suggests that in the vast orchestra of the world, the most moving part might not always be the leading melody, but the supporting harmony, the discrete line, the fateful echo. It's acknowledging the essential nature of those contributions that don't demand the spotlight.
Who do these secondary voices represent in the context of the work, then?
The source gives examples like shadow musicians, invisible helpers, erased dreamers. They're the ones who build foundations, who provide support, often doing crucial work without recognition or fanfare.
And is the perspective here one of, like, sorrow or victimhood or something else?
No, the source is actually very clear. It's not a victim discourse. It's presented more as a claim of place, made with dignity.
Okay.
These voices aren't seeking celebrity. They're seeking correctness, maybe, truthfulness in their contribution, a recognition of their inherent value.
That's a really important distinction, I think. It reframes quietness or marginality not as a lack of power, but perhaps a different kind of power.
Exactly. The work pays homage to this essential, often invisible presence that underpins so much. The source also mentions tracks like Mode Murmur, Whispering Mode, and Rain Queen.
Whispering as strength, and a queen who refuses to shout. How do those fit this theme?
Well, in Mode Murmur, whispering itself becomes an act of strength, like a deliberate choice in a noisy world.
Ah, I see.
And in Rain, feminine sovereignty isn't asserted through loudness or dominance, but maybe in a refusal to engage on those terms. It's kind of a subversion of conventional power dynamics.
So the insight here is that power isn't only found in the center, in the loudest voice, but can exist and thrive in the quiet, the marginal, the secondary.
It points to what the source calls a new typology of power, one born from chosen silence, from active listening, from invincible constancy. It's described almost as a gentle but decisive revolution.
That leads us beautifully into the third axis, resilience and effacement. How does the work explore this idea of persistence when everything around you feels like noise or forgetting or even active erasure?
This theme feels very, very contemporary. Tracks like Brut statique, pas de signal, static noise, no signal, and Que le silence me ramène chez moi, may silence bring me home, seem to speak directly to this.
Static, no signal, seeking home in silence. Wow. That really captures the feeling of being lost or disconnected in a saturated digital world, doesn't it?
It does. The source describes a voice trying to exist amidst, digital cacophony, a world overflowing with noise, and what it terms organized forgetting.
Organized forgetting.
Yeah. Yet despite this, the voice persists. It navigates abnormality, resists mental programming, and just continues to breathe, described as fragile but loyal.
And the resilience isn't about overcoming the noise by being louder. Is that the idea?
No, the insight from the source seems to be that resilience here is about persistence, not necessarily confrontation. It's like a song sung into the void, a call made perhaps without immediate response, but one that steadfastly affirmed its presence against the forces of effacement.
This really resonates with our experience online sometimes, where visibility feels controlled by algorithms and identities can feel atomized or easily ignored.
It definitely highlights that struggle. The work seems to make the assertion that even when you feel like you have no signal, a sincere voice still has the power to shape reality, to simply be there. And this theme culminates really powerfully, according to the source, in the final track, Chanson pour les enfants de la terre, songs for the children of the earth.
Okay, how does that final track connect to resilience?
The source describes it as elevating this principle almost to a promise. The act of writing or singing for those you won't see who are distant or untouched by the noise,
Right.
that becomes an act of transgenerational love and transmission. It's framed as a kind of lullaby for tomorrow, woven from the ruins of today, carried forward by the quiet echo of a promise. It's resilience not just for survival, but for continuation.
So bringing these threads together, the memory held in forgotten spaces, the quiet strength of secondary voices, and this persistence against effacement, how does the source kind of summarize the overarching message of étendu sans repère, Mayfliss?
It's presented almost as a poetic manifesto, you could say, a call to rehabilitate memory, to deeply value marginal voices, and to find resilience not in shouting, but in presence, even amidst forced silences.
It offers a countermap, then, a different way to navigate the world.
Exactly. The core insights seem to be that the invisible isn't necessarily forgotten, that murmuring can indeed heal, and that the voices seemingly from yesterday can still offer salvation, maybe for tomorrow. It's offered as both an aesthetic and a political alternative, a sensitive map for a world that might feel mapeless.
To make these maybe slightly abstract ideas more concrete, the source material shares a really moving story, the journey of a character named 𝗓𝗓𝗔𝗓. This story seems to embody so many of the themes we've just discussed.
Yeah, 𝗓𝗓𝗔𝗓 is described as a liminal being, someone who grew up with a pretty fluid identity and mixed heritage. Kabyle and Tamul, raised in rural Ardèche by a Sufi grandmother and a Catholic aunt. Her difference was often kept secret, apparently.
So she lived in those borderlands, those quiet spaces we were talking about.
Absolutely. And for years, her voice was apparently a secret, too. She sang only for nature, for the stones, the sources, the trees, the animals. It was described as a private breath of her soul.
Wow.
She'd record her murmurs on these dusty old cassettes, convinced that someone like her, from her background, living her truth in secret, would never be truly listened to.
That feeling of singing into a void, assuming you'll never be heard, that really resonates with the secondary voice theme, doesn't it?
Deeply. The turning point, as told in the source, came with her aunt's death. It prompted her to sing genuinely for the first time, not just to herself or nature. It's described as this wordless, deep, golden wave that momentarily made the wind stop, a raw, essential expression of grief and being.
And how did she eventually connect with TATANKA and this project?
It sounds almost accidental. She found a crumpled flyer in a library. It said, "Call for Forgotten Voices, join TATANKA's Orchestra Americana." When she visited the website, she was apparently profoundly moved. It spoke of diversity as a gift, of marginality as a beacon. They were specifically seeking ancient, unheard, lost, ignored voices, calling them children of the earth.
It was like a direct call to the part of her that felt unseen, maybe.
Exactly. She hesitated, that inner voice of doubt telling her this world wasn't for someone like her. But the memory of her grandmother, an older voice, apparently urged her that her voice was a bridge.
So she sent something in.
She did. She took one of those old cassettes, converted it to MP3, and sent a demo expecting absolutely nothing.
But something unexpected happened, I'm guessing.
A week later, she was invited to Paris to join the Orchestra Americana. The source describes it as bringing together people from really diverse, often invisible backgrounds from suburbs, forests, invisible beaches, as it puts it.
Can you give us a sense of the space and the people she met there? What was that like?
The studio is described almost like a greenhouse full of light, naive art, old instruments, suspended plants, even children running around. There, she met this constellation of artists. Idir, described as a queer harpist. Naima, a non-seeing cellist. Layla, an urban shaman. They weren't just musicians. They were framed as a constellation of unique lights brought together.
A gathering of those secondary voices. And what was her experience recording with them?
It sounds transformative. The source says when she sang into the microphone, the earth itself seemed to respond, her voice vibrating low, awakening ancestral memories.
Wow.
The AI conductor, Mirai, integrated her breathing into the music in real time. And the critical insight from the source about this moment is that for the first time in her life, she felt listened to for who she was, not just for her background or what she might represent to others.
That feeling of true reception, of being heard at your core, that's powerful. What project did she contribute to specifically?
She contributed to a piece called Les Sons du Lien, The Ashes of the Link. It apparently wove together forgotten cultural songs with soundscapes from dreams.
Interesting mix.
Yeah. Her voice, specifically, sang about her ancestors' crossings, the silences imposed by gender expectations, whispered prayers, and a hope for global harmony arising from shy voices. Each note, the source says poetically, was a singing star.
And the impact of these performances, what did the source say about that?
The concerts were held in unusual resonant locations, caves, old train stations, ruins. The source describes the audience response as really profound people crying, but not necessarily from sadness, but from a sense of relief, almost.
Relief.
Yeah, like many felt that someone was finally carrying their voice, or that the music unlocked buried memories of forgotten cradles, lost grandmothers, suppressed mother tongues. Her voice became a vessel, in a way, for a collective history.
So she didn't find fame in the conventional sense, but she found something arguably much more meaningful.
Exactly. The story concludes by saying she never sought fame, but in this unique orchestra she found her tribe, her place, and her mission. She was no longer alone in murmuring in the night. She became, for many, the voice of those who never dared speak.
The story of 𝗓𝗓𝗔𝗓 really brings everything we've discussed into sharp focus, doesn't it? What's the most powerful takeaway the source emphasizes through her journey?
I think the source uses her story to underline a fundamental truth. To be listened to is to exist.
That echoes back perfectly to that Cyrulnik quote at the beginning. What is not named, what is not heard, risks not existing and being repeated.
Precisely. Her experience reinforces the core mission of TATANKA and the Orchestra Americana that the source describes. Empowering peripheral voices, valuing broken songs, recognizing non-normed identities. It frames music and artistic expression as an act of justice, almost, and necessary recognition in a world that often overlooks.
And she herself becomes an embodiment of that poetic resilience we talked about.
Yeah, the source holds her up as an embodiment of resilience for a generation that might feel hybrid, wounded, but still standing. Her voice is presented as a direct response to effacement, a refusal to be wiped away. Her song is a quiet promise that margins can indeed become new centers of gravity and meaning. In her chosen silence, she found a powerful light, and she offered it to the world.
Well, this deep dive into TATANKA's étendue sans repère, Mapeless, has certainly illuminated the powerful ideas within the source material, the vital memory held in abandoned spaces, the quiet strength and essential nature of secondary voices, and the profound resilience found in persistence against effacement.
It's a compelling argument, isn't it? For paying attention to what the world often discards or overlooks.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. Thinking about this memory of abandoned places or the power of secondary voices, are there overlooked spaces in your own community, perhaps, or quiet voices in your life or culture that might hold important stories or truths just waiting to be acknowledged?
Yeah, what might it look like for you to find or perhaps offer that light and silence in your own experience? Something to ponder.